Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen. This wasn't the video I had planned for today, but between work, harvest time, and some family matters, that video will be premiering next week. Daylight happens to be at a premium these days. So today I thought we'd have some fun and poke at the pedants, as it was. But first, the obligatory self-promotion. My new book, Battle Games Book 2, is out. If you're interested in a science fiction sports book about a bunch of weirdos fighting other weirdos with stun sticks shaped like medieval weapons in a massive international sport, look no further. Or if you just want to judge my writing as I have for so many others, that's okay too. I will leave a link in the description to my full works, including my second series about homesteading in a post-apocalyptic city. I welcome all comments and criticisms. It's how I grow as an author. Back to the pedantry. Today we're going to cover something fairly standard. The article. It's official, these 13 books are now banned from all public schools in Utah. So now we have a list of books being banned from public schools in Utah. 13 in fact, which is my second favorite number. I'm sure we've all seen this song and dance before. Someone screams they're banning the books, and a bunch of folks open their wallet to support random author du jour. So let's dive in and see the what, the why, and more importantly, the who. The Utah School Board on Friday ordered the removal of 13 book titles from every public school in the state, in accordance with a new law passed earlier this year. This list's publications come only weeks before the new school year will begin. 6 of the 13 titles were written by the same fantasy romance author, Sarah J. Maas. Districts and charter schools must now dispose of the following titles according to the Utah State Board of Education, marking a historical first for the state. 3 sentences into the article and we already have our first major who, Sarah J. Maas. If you're not familiar, she's a popular romantasy author. She wrote the A Court of Thorns and Roses series and has actually been quite prolific. If by some miracle you stumbled upon this video without knowing what romantasy is, I'll fill you in. Romantasy is a genre defined by a generic female protagonist hooking up with fantasy creature, warriors, or elements of the week. These books are almost universally doorstops with a 500-page minimum to enter the genre. If you're old enough to remember the trashy romance books at the front of the grocery store with Fabio plastered all over the cover, you'll have the general idea. The difference is the grocery store romance books didn't try to masquerade as something else. I've read from 3 of these series. The first was the A Court of Thorns and Roses, which is fairy smut. Then there's Fourth Wing, which is Dragon Valley Girl smut, and Lightlark, which is baffling Avatar: The Last Airbender smut. Next, we need to establish the fact that a school library removing books from its shelves does not equal banning. Libraries have limited shelf space and school libraries are there for a purpose, that being giving kids access to the books they'll need to facilitate their learning. Romantasy books are chonkers. I honestly have manuals of material specifications that take up less space. I'm sure little Timmy will get more out of a book on history than what fantasy creature Miss Protagonist is eventually banging this week. Moving on. These books are now banned from all Utah public schools. Blankets by Craig Thompson, A Court of Frost and Starlight by Sarah J. Maas, A Court of Mist and Fury by Sarah J. Maas, A Court of Silver Flames by Sarah J. Maas, A Court of Thorns and Roses by Sarah J. Maas, A Court of Wings and Ruin by, of course, Sarah J. Maas. Alright, I'm gonna have to look up some of these books and deal with them individually. First up, Blankets by Craig Thompson. Maybe it's just modernity, but I have a bad feeling. So reading the description on the Amazon page, it looks like it's a book about a love story between teenagers who met at a church camp. I get the feeling I'm being misled. There are 2 ways to find out what's wrong with this book, and the first is the reviews. Let's check the 1 stars. Names will be withheld. Here's one. From the cover, this story appears to be about 2 teenagers coming of age. It is not. It is about what 2 brothers did to irritate and aggravate each other by sharing a bed at night to the point that their dad came and hauled off the younger brother, very young school age, and forced him into a closet they both absolutely feared. Abusive terror. How is this supposed to teach, support, encourage, and edify young children? One reader commented about how the boys urinated on each other. I thought the younger boy simply wet the bed, but based on the rest of the book, yes, I agree that this very disturbing behavior was not a child's bedtime mistake. Definitely very graphic grooming. And then the older brother got his at school when two obvious high school boys bullied him while their teacher actually encouraged it, making fun of him and abusively, verbally taunting and ostracizing him in front of the whole class. Not only did this promote and condone peer bullying, but it also supported the teacher's abuse. Don't forget about the, not going to say that word, abuse. It's very clearly depicted in the book when each boy gets taken separately into the next room to tell a joke that's so funny they have to be told separately. Even as an adult, my mind was highly alerted and my jaw was dropping to view and read each heartbreaking page turn. So why did I read it? Honestly, I read it to review it, extending an open mind to what was projected to be a coming-of-age book, of which was very clearly nothing of the sort at all. Do not be fooled by the cover. How this book got approved into a child's school program and/or library, I will never know. Perhaps some of the adults voting it in are bullies themselves. Or perhaps they felt the book spoke from their own abused childhoods. I would almost feel tempted to check out every copy from the library and never return them, just to keep the children from viewing this book. This book needs a graphic warning label, front and back. I would never allow my kids to read this book. And I hope this book does not make the rounds into other schools. My vote would be to cast it out. If parents want their children reading this kind of comic, verbal, and abuse, then put it in a specifically designated area at Barnes & Nobles or something, not in a public school. I'm not saying children don't get abused, this is certain. However, maybe the best place for this book would be one copy in the nurse's office as a resource when a troubled child comes to school and needs to leave the class due to flashbacks or an after effect. Only 1 star here, and I wish I didn't have to give it that. I do apologize for some of the mispronunciations in that. Reviews aren't always given the second look. Well, that was a bit more informative. I can't take this at 100% because I haven't read the book. It honestly sounds like something that should be kept out of the hands of children. Probably out of the hands of adults, too. I think you get put on a list if you have that kind of stuff on your hard drive. Perhaps this is just a disgruntled fan or someone who's making stuff up in order to get an author he doesn't like pretty much canceled. Let's check Google for other controversies with this book. People ask, what are the trigger warnings for Blankets by Craig Thompson? Content warning, abuse, nudity, and religion are discussed in this review. Well, that's unfortunate. So yes, I can see why this book may be banned in Mormon country Utah. Going back to our list, we have the entirety of the ACOTAR series. As I've stated before, I don't think this book series about a random thought hooking up with a bunch of hunky men under the guise that they're fairies is necessary reading. Leaving out the not safe for work stuff, the books, at least the first, are not that interesting. The first book was long, meandering, and lived in the protagonist's head. If you aren't a fan of long-winded romance, you're not going to like it. Part of the reason for a school library is to get kids to enjoy the act of reading. I don't care how you try to force it, boys, most of them anyway, aren't going to enjoy this kind of book. In fact, it will probably push them away from reading. I didn't start reading until the last year of high school, and that was mainly because I was bored by most of the books I was given. It's hard to sell people on stuff they don't like. You don't sell barbecue books to vegans, and you're not going to sell romantasy to boys and men. More books on the list. Empire of Storms by Sarah J. Maas. Fallout by Ellen Hopkins. Forever by Judy Blume. Milk and Honey by Rupi Kaur. Oryx and Crake by Margaret Atwood. Tilt by Ellen Hopkins. And What Girls Are Made Of by Elena K. Arnold. Another Sarah J. Maas book. I'll save us all some time and skip that one. Fallout by Ellen Hopkins. I doubt it means like the game. Well, it's nice to not have to look any further than the description to understand. Allow me, I will censor where needed. Hunter, Autumn, and Summer. 3 of Christina Snow's 5 children. live in different houses with different guardians and different last names. They share only a predisposition for addiction and a host of troubled feelings towards their mother, who barely knows them. A mother who's been riding with the monster Crank for 20 years. Hunter is 19, angry, getting by in college with a job at a radio station, a girlfriend he loves in the only way he knows how, and the occasional party. He is struggling to understand why his mother left him when he unexpectedly meets his struggle-snugglest father, and things get even more complicated. Autumn lives with her single aunt and alcoholic grandfather. When her aunt gets married and the only family she's ever known crumbles. Autumn's compulsive habits lead her to drink, and the consequences of her decision suggest there is more of Christina in her than she'd like to believe. Summer doesn't know about Hunter, Autumn, or their two youngest brothers, Donald and David. To her, family is only abuse at the hands of her father's girlfriend and a slew of foster parents. Doubt and loneliness overwhelm her, and she too teeters on the edge of her mother's notorious legacy. As each searches for real love and true family, they find themselves pulled towards the one person who links them together, Christina. Bree, mother, addict. But it is in each other and in themselves that they find the trust, the courage, the hope to break the cycle. Told in 3 voices and punctuated by news articles chronicling the family's story. Fallout is a stunning conclusion to the trilogy begun by Crank and Glass, and a testament to the harsh reality that addiction is never just one person's problem. I'm sure there are adults that find books about a broken family entertaining. I'm not sure why. Honestly, this book sounds horrible. I don't have to read this book. I've seen it happen to people. Assuming there are no graphic depictions of a naked nature, which I'm sure there probably are, this is what I'd call an adult book. It deals with situations that would either go over the heads of the young and impressionable, or scar them with confusion. It's like reading about war crimes of the last century, something you don't want kids exposed to until they're old enough to process it. Yes, this book may offer a new perspective to an adult, but it could seriously mess up a kid who comes from a loving family and never encountered abuse before. Some things people aren't always ready for. Next book. Forever by Judy Blume. I remember reading Judy Blume as a kid. Super Fudge was basically required reading in elementary school. That being said, I remember Bob Saget from Full House. That didn't mean I was ready for his stand-up at 7 years old. Let's look into the book. Is there a difference between first love and true love? Judy Blume's groundbreaking novel about teen has a fresh new audiobook treatment. The bed is brass, covered with a patchwork quilt, and nice and firm, Michael says, in case you are interested. Catherine is interested. Catherine and Michael are in love, and Catherine knows it's forever, especially after she loses her to him. But when they're separated for the summer, she begins to have feelings for another boy. What does this say about her love for Michael? And what does forever mean anyway? Is this the love of a lifetime, or the beginning of a lifetime of love? Well, that's certainly different from the Judy Blume I remember, but it kind of proves the point. I can tell by the description that this is not a kid's book. I'm noticing a pattern in these banned books that I feel I honestly shouldn't be surprised by. Why are so many people trying to expose kids to what's behind the beaded curtain at the local video store? If you get that reference, congratulations, you're old. Next book. Milk and Honey by Rupi Kaur. I'm assuming this isn't a biblical thing. Okay, Amazon, do your thing. This book is divided into 4 chapters, each serves a different purpose. Deals with a different pain, heals a different heartache. Milk and Honey takes readers through a journey of the most bitter moments in life and finds sweetness in them because there is sweetness in everything if you're just willing to look. Dang, and I thought I was stingy with descriptions. Oh wait! Best of Book Talk! Alright, no need to look further, that's where Lightlart comes from. I'm pretty sure I know what we're in for. Well, to be professional, I guess I'll dig a little deeper. Turning to the 1 stars. I've never been so certain that I would like a book only to be so horribly let down. I was so confident that I would like this book that I packed this as one of the only 7 books I brought on vacation, not even considering it for elimination. I found Rupi Kaur, after hearing her name drifting about, when I saw a breathtaking piece by her, starting with, "Let me tell you about a selfish person." When I looked up the book on Amazon, I was blown away by the number of 5-star reviews. Poetry hardly ever gets this much recognition. I started to get really excited to read this book. Well, apart from the beautiful piece mentioned above, I really couldn't find anything to like about this book. I love poetry. I love traditional poetry, structured poetry, unstructured poetry, modern poetry, stand-up poetry, you name it. I'm not a snob. My shelves are lined with just as much edgy, modern, is this even poetry books from up-and-coming poets as they are lined with T.S. Eliot and Tennyson. But honestly, I find it pretty offensive that this book is passing for poetry. This reads like a 15-year-old's angsty journal. The poems are relatable, sure, but that's where it ends for me. This book seems to be a series of extremely cliché sentiments about self-love, romance, social issues, etc., chopped up to look like poetry. Where is the imagery? Where is the rhythm? Where is the originality? Where is the soul? Why do people like this book? Ah, bad poetry about social issues. I can kind of see where this is going. There's a reason we study the masters in school. It's to give us the best example of what to strive for. Being yet another bad book of poems does not give you school library status. I've looked through some of the other reviews and surprise, surprise, the book has strong adult content. Well, that's every book so far on this list. Let's move on. Oryx and Crake by Margaret Atwood. Why does that name sound familiar? I feel like I've heard it somewhere before, but I just can't place it. Well, Amazon, do your thing. A stunning and provocative new novel by the internationally celebrated author of The Blind Assassin, winner of the Booker Prize. Margaret Atwood's new novel is so utterly compelling, so prescient, so relevant, so terrifyingly all too likely to be true, that listeners may find their view of the world forever changed after listening to it. This is Margaret Atwood at the absolute peak of her powers. For listeners of Oryx and Crake, nothing will ever look the same again. The narrator of Atwood's riveting novel calls himself Snowman. When the story opens, he is sleeping in a tree, wearing an old bedsheet, mourning the loss of his beloved Oryx and his best friend Crake, and slowly starving to death. He searches for supplies in a wasteland where insects proliferate, and pigeons and wolvogs ravage the pleblands, where ordinary people once lived, and the compounds that sheltered the extraordinary. As he tries to piece together what has taken place, the narrator shifts to decades earlier. How did everything fall apart so quickly? Why is he left with nothing but his haunting memories, alone except for the green-eyed children of Crake, who think of him as kind of a monster? He explores the answers to these questions in the double jeopardy he takes, into his own past and back to Crake's high-tech bubble dome where the Paradise Project unfolded and the world came to grief. With breathtaking command of her shocking material, and with her customary sharp wit and dark humor, Atwood projects us into an outlandish yet wholly believable realm populated by characters who will continue to inhabit our dreams long after the last chapter. This is Margaret Atwood at the absolute peak of her powers. I'm getting a strong feeling I know why this one was removed. And it's not just because it sounds like it's full of flashbacks. Mainly from the lines of old bedsheet and the fact the guy is in the wasteland unsupervised with someone else's kids. Let's look at the reviews. Okay, I can't put these reviews in my video because of the mention of children and the things this book does with them. Suffice to say, it would get them introduced to a sharpened toothbrush if the book was a prison inmate. Moving on. Tilt by Ellen Hopkins. I'm getting that feeling again. Alright Amazon, what have you got? Love, Good and Bad forces 3 teens' worlds to tilt in a riveting standalone novel from #1 New York Times best-selling author Ellen Hopkins. 3 teens, 3 stories, all interconnected through their parents-family relationships as the adults pull away, caught up in their own dilemmas. The world of the teens begins to tilt. Michaela, almost 18, is over the top in love with Dylan, who loves her back jealously. But what happens to that love when Michaela gets pregnant the summer before her senior year and decides to keep the baby? Shane turns 16 that same summer, falls hard in love with his first boyfriend, Alex, who happens to be HIV positive. Shane has lived for 4 years with his little sister's impending death. Can he accept Alex's love knowing his life, too, will be shortened? Harley is 14, a good girl searching for new experiences, especially love from an older boy. She never expects to hurtle towards self-destruction extremes in order to define who she is and who she wants to be. Love in all its forms has crucial consequences in this wrenching story by Ellen Hopkins. Well, I can't imagine why a state with a heavily religious population wouldn't want their kids reading about teen pregnancy, underage inappropriateness, and the spread of an incurable STD. How did this get in the schools in the first place? Is this some administrator's fetish material? I've read all I'm going to read on this book. Moving on. What Girls Are Made Of by Elena K. Arnold. Please don't let it be 13 for 13. Please don't let it be 13 for 13. Oh, please don't let it be 13 for 13. Let this be some wholesome book that made it onto this list by mistake or personal bias. The description isn't much, but there's a review just below it from the School Library Journal that has me worried. Nina has had a crush on Seth since 5th grade. But it wasn't until the summer after her 16th birthday that he finally acknowledged her feelings for him. Now Nina will do whatever is necessary to maintain his affection. She is fully aware that all love comes with conditions. Her mother, in particular, has made that very clear. But as the only child of dysfunctional parents, Nina craves the attention that Seth offers. Thoughts of him occupy her every waking hour, so when she unwittingly fails his unexpected test of her loyalty, she finds herself alone and adrift, especially after she makes a startling realization. When even her best friend fails to support her, Nina looks for help and solace in unlikely places, including at a dog shelter. In and afterward, Arnold explains that this story is the result of her anger and complicity in the rules that society applies to girls. Her overarching theme is the fallacy of believing in unconditional love. The author presents a hopeful conclusion that Nina learns that self-love and fulfillment can be found through helping others. Verdict: because of its complex symbolism and graphic imagery, this well-written novel is best suited to mature YA readers. There's a few things in that scare me. The first is she's 16, the second is the mention of self-love, and the third is the mention of a dog shelter. The internet has irreversibly scarred me. This isn't an unfounded fear given the other books on this list. Digging deeper. Okay, good news, bad news time. The good news is the dog thing only has to do with corpse desecration. Still terrible, but not as horrible as I was expecting. Turns out this list is 13 for 13 and all these books have explicit content. It's a bit of a harrowing list. Let's continue with the article. How are these books banned statewide? The books on this list had already been banned by select school districts or charters, but because of the new law signed by Governor Spencer Cox in March, they will now be banned statewide. The law, which went into effect on July 1st, requires that a book be removed from all public schools in the state if at least 3 school districts, or at least 2 school districts and 5 charter schools, determine it amounts to objective sensitive material, pornographic or otherwise indecent content as defined by Utah Code. Since the law applies retroactively, school districts and charters were asked to reevaluate the books that they had already decided to ban before July 1st, using the state's new Objective Sensitive Material criteria, a standard that did not exist before. Sounds like the governor has the right of it. Ew, I just praised a politician. All of these books do appear to contain explicit material. If an individual was pushing this material on kids, we'd call it grooming. I'm not sure why it's different if it's a public institution doing it. We're entrusting schools to educate kids so they have the skills to navigate the world as adults. I'm not sure how exposing them to this gooner bait is going to do that. It sounds like a poor attempt at disguising grooming as education. Continuing on with the article. Once those reevaluations were completed, the school district submitted a list of the banned titles that they found met the new criteria to the Utah State Board of Education. Those submissions were then aggregated in a spreadsheet, and the data was organized by book title as well as district or charter to determine which titles met the threshold, USBE officials said. Under the law, USBE members may still decide to overturn a statewide ban for each title that met the threshold, an action board leadership will always be able to take should more titles be subject to statewide removal. So it sounds like there's a lot of effort and eyes on this, and it wasn't some arbitrary decision. Something I could have deduced from the shared characteristics of all the books on this list. To overturn a book statewide removal, 3 or more USBE leaders have 30 days from the moment a statewide ban is instituted to request that the material be placed on a board meeting agenda so leaders can vote on the matter. If no hearing is held, the statewide removal stands. Moving forward, districts and charters must report any objective sensitive material that they decide to remove to USBE. Upon receiving those alerts, the state board will notify districts and charters within 10 school days if any title meets the statewide removal threshold, as well as publish the titles to a public list on its website. It is good to know the process. I'm glad there was a lot of thought put into it, and I'm glad for a number of reasons the school board is taking these steps. See which school districts originally banned the books. Here is a breakdown of the individual school district book bans that led to the title's statewide removal, according to USBE. Both Davis and Washington County school districts each banned all 13 titles included on Friday's list. Alpine School District and Nebo School District each banned 7 of the titles on the statewide removal list. Jordan School District banned 6 of the titles, and Tooele County School District banned 1. Collectively, the individual bans led to the titles reaching the new threshold for statewide removal. No charter schools had banned the books on the Friday list, according to USBE. The article goes on to give a more comprehensive list of which books were removed and where originally. It's a bit odd that parts of the ACOTAR series were available and others weren't in the same district, i.e., Jordan removed only 2 of the 5 books in the ACOTAR series. That's bureaucracy for you. There could be other reasons for this. If you step outside the explicit material being removed, there's another side to this story. First of all, these books aren't banned. They're removed from a school library. These are books bought with taxpayer money. While we all have our favorite authors we'd like to share with other people, giving these authors a payday on the taxpayer's dime is not always going to be an option. There are far too many books to fit into any school library. Secondly, as I've stated before, school libraries serve a purpose. The books contained therein are for the education of the students. This means the books need to be tailored towards that end. Yes, there will be novels, as is only right and proper. Novels in school libraries serve 2 purposes. One is to expand a child's reading ability, and the second is to interest the child in reading. This is kind of like playing to build a skill. The books on this list are going to either scar or bore most kids. I'm not sure when this trend of putting books of this graphic nature in schools became a thing. My first assumption is to prey on other people's kids. Most of my life I've been assured by TV, college, and modern artists that good art is shocking. Then I see what pieces withstand the test of time. Most of the culturally significant art isn't that shocking. Of course, that could be due to exposure. Yes, there are statues and paintings of naked people doing rowdy things. There's also a huge amount of religious art, historical pieces, and painting of everyday places and people. I say that to say art doesn't have to be shocking. And it certainly doesn't have to be shocking to kids. Good luck, everyone.